Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing today? So we're going to get into this free agency, all the news and rumors and all the reports that we have. A lot of news came out yesterday, a lot of speculation, things like that, all the stories. We're going to get right into it with this free agency edition. Today will be the day of the legal tampering window. There's a lot of reports about the Commanders going to be very active. So we're just going to get into it, and we're going to talk about the state of this. We all know here that I'm a big draft guy, so very very seldom are there any off seasons where I'm promoting many signings on more towards the top tier. We're going to get into that right now. There's a lot of reasons why I'm actually into this class. We're going to start with Tyler Linderbaum. Jordan Schultz reported that the Commanders are going to be very, very in on the Tyler Linderbaum sweepstakes if he becomes available to free agency if the Baltimore Ravens do not re-sign him. This would be a player. This would be a top of the market. This would be a top tier, top two offensive center in the NFL. Let me just clarify this real quick. So there's a big reason why this team doesn't have cap space. If we can keep pointing back to the Ron Rivera era, this isn't blaming anything on the Ron Rivera era, but let's just say if until year 5, AP and Dan Quinn are not going to have drafted enough players to sustain this roster going long term. When you didn't have the amount of first round picks that the Ron Rivera regime did not re-sign to this roster, that is the reason that this team has a lot of cap space. So the fact that we have not drafted and developed under the Ron Rivera era very well, that is a reason why you do not have the 25, the 26, 27-year-old players that are coming to their second contract that have grown and developed here, that you're going to have to go out and add players like this in the free agency pool because you don't have these type of players on your roster. The Tyler Linderbaums of the world do not typically get to the market. The reason that I am actually a proponent of signing this level of player is because, one, with Jaden Daniels, you are on the rookie contract. 2, this is a direct impact of keeping your investment in Jaden Daniels protected, maximizing his skill set, adding to the run blocking department. And I have a theory about offensive linemen. I feel like you need three top tier offensive linemen, and then you need 2 guys that are younger that you are drafting and developing currently, especially while the quarterback is under their rookie deal. As you get the quarterback into his second contract, you better have drafted offensive linemen to take over for the more expensive aging offensive linemen, such as Tunsil, such as Cosme moving forward when they're getting into their 30s, or Tunsil was in his 30s as he approaches like 35, 36, and in those years, he is currently 31, going to be 32. The biggest thing is when you have not drafted and developed the roster the way that the roster is currently slated. If Ron Rivera had done a better job of drafting players, we would not have probably had Jaden Daniels, but let's say he did. You would probably have an offensive center on the roster that you were looking to re-sign. Would it be Tyler Linderbaum? Would it be in that market? Would it be that level of player? Probably not, but you have that type of player on the roster that you give a second contract to. Same thing at wide receiver or any other position that, we could have drafted, we could have developed. We did not do that under the Ron Rivera regime. In fact, all the first round picks are gone. Most of the second, third, and fourth are gone. There's only 2 players from the Ron Rivera regime that you even think about re-signing, and that's Quan Martin and Sam Cosme has already gotten a deal because those are 2 draft picks that have actually shown a level of play that you'd be willing to maybe re-sign, even though Quan Martin is coming off of one of his worst seasons as a pro. That doesn't mean he can't correct it, but those are the only 2 players that have showed competence in even warranting a second contract. Maybe Chris Rodriguez, Chris Paul finally came on in year 4 as a contract player, but you're probably going to let him leave because you can actually upgrade the interior offensive line with a Tyler Linderbaum who would not normally typically hit the market. That's why I'm stressing this. For me, I don't usually get into free agency like this, but this free agency period, you finally have some guys that actually fit what your team needs, your quarterback's best skill set. I'm going to get into that with my next free agent because we've been linked to him too. There's a lot of reports going around. Nobody actually knows. Nobody's actually talking about, the things we've heard from inside the Commanders building, nobody's reporting any of that. So all this is speculation. Will we go out and sign Tyler Linderbaum? I would love it. I think it would be a great signing. Having Sam Cosme a top 6 offensive guard in the NFL, that would be great, having him next to Connerly. Then you put Tyler Linderbaum, a top 3, top 2 offensive center, and then having Laramie Tunsil on the other side. You have done the right thing as far as the drafting and developing year 2 under this regime. Getting the Josh Connerly Jr., that just gives you another high-end piece at a value, contract because he's a rookie. If you told me that 3 years ago, the offensive line that we had with Trent Williams and Brandon Scherff and those guys, Chase Roulier, what it became under Ron Rivera, to in year 3, if you were to add a Tyler Linderbaum, that is the type of offensive line that you can go to the playoffs with. That's the type of offensive line that you can win in the playoffs with. And if it stays healthy, that should be a premier offensive line as far as the run game, as far as the consistency that they put up week to week. Your quarterback should be healthy. These are the type of players that you need on a roster to actually get to a Super Bowl. And if you had have drafted better under the Ron Rivera regime and those players had panned out and been developed properly, you're not going to have this level of cap space because you're going to already have the influx of talent on your roster. Typically, bad teams, they still have holdovers that you want to re-sign. Maybe not all of them fit, but you get to this point, you start playing more of the comp pick game because you're re-signing your homegrown players. You're letting other players go that are expendable. We don't have players that are we only have players that are expendable from that era. They're players that are not going to be re-signed. So we have to go into this market to get a level of competition on this team that is going to be able to excel and play up to the level that you need to compete in this league. It can't be all Jaden being Superman, so you're going to have to give him pieces. So that's why I'm actually a proponent of this offseason. And when I say I'm a proponent of paying these guys this offseason, the only reason I'm willing to pay, and I am only naming this guy or this guy or this guy or this guy. Maybe some of them are top of the market. Generally, I'm not in on the top of the market guys. But when it comes to the age factor with Tyler Linderbaum, 25 years old, this player right here that I'm about to talk about, Alec Pierce, is the next guy that we've been reported to, 25 years old. What is Alec Pierce's best skill set? If you had told me a couple weeks ago, I've mentioned it on the pod many times. I mentioned that Alec Pierce would be a perfect schematical fit for what this team needs from that position. You can do it a multitude of different ways. You add Deshaun Jackson, a burner guy that you put the ball up in the air, he runs under, he tracks it very well. Then you have big guys like Vincent Jackson over the course of history. Alec Pierce plays that type of style. He's a bigger guy. He beats you with speed. He has long speed down the field, but he can beat you vertically. He can beat you vertically with his body, shadowing out the defenders, using his body to box guys out, play above the rim. He separates schematically. It shows up, and then he creates separation with his speed and the other assets that he has. And what is Jaden's best skill set? Jaden's best skill set is the deep ball. When Terry McLaurin was not out there last year, and then you had Debo as your number 2, the year before you had De'Ami Brown, who played a more vertical element like Alec Pierce. That's why you saw it be so successful with the way that we used, De'Ami Brown, and that's why he had his, probably the best season that he had here as a pro. So again, it's about using these players in a multitude of ways that really, really accentuates their best skill set. I've talked about a ton of these guys, but Alec Pierce to me is worth it. Do I think Alec Pierce is worth $28 million a year? He's going to get that on the free agency market. If he was a homegrown player, you're probably getting this player for around $24 million a year for what he's done. You're locking him up early. You're not letting him get to the market. You maybe can work that out, but since the Colts didn't do that, since he is available, he was a player that I didn't even actually think would become available. The only reason I talked to him was because of his skill set and the way that he plays, that dimension that would add to this roster, the fact that is Jaden Daniels' best skill set as a passer is deep down the field, dropping the ball into a bucket and getting guys, to make the big play. That is the element of this team that we have not had consistently since Jaden Daniels has been here, and that is his best asset. So maximizing Jaden Daniels' skill set is the number one priority for this team. Yes, you can look at the defense and say, this defense needs a lot of guys. Signing 2 premier level offensive players, or even talking about Jeremiah Love, it's all we need defense. We need defense. Well, yes, you need defense, but the best thing for this team going forward is putting as many pieces around Jaden Daniels as you possibly can under his rookie window to maximize the development of Jaden Daniels. This is not about going to the Super Bowl. Two teams go to the Super Bowl every year. One team is the team that did what their goal was for the beginning of the season. That is win the Super Bowl. It takes years of accumulation of roster talent. It takes years of good decisions. We didn't have that before AP and Dan Quinn got here. And not that Dan Quinn and AP have been perfect on every personnel move that they made, and no organization will. But these are the type of players that we do not have on our roster because of bad drafting previously. The fact that they are available, the fact that they actually fit systematically, stylistically, the type of age that you do pay these type of contracts to, that is the only reason that I'm even willing to go into these type of markets. And that is the reason that I've been so, back and forth on actually going in, diving into these type of players. Every player that, we talk about is not going to be a player that they add. And, how many top of the market, deals are you going to give? It's very, very hard to say. Are you going to put two, top of the market years on, two offensive players, knowing that the state of this defense? It's really, really hard to say because, again, while all this is being speculated and it's being discussed, nobody knows. Nobody's actually getting these reports from inside the Commanders building, which is another reason that I really, really like what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have really established here as a culture. But this is a time where culture and having the good boys here and the veterans that have, kind of taught these guys how to work and how to, how you're going to have to work through injuries and take care of your body. This is the point where you need to supplement the roster with the things that it is missing because the regime before you, the decisions that they made, the decisions that you made for the state of the roster that you inherited, you are missing these pieces. This team needs the 25, the 26, the 27-year-old players to fill out the depth and the bones of this roster. We cannot go back and redraft and get and do better. So because we cannot do that, the fact that these players are available, you should be in their markets because they fit what you do. Are you going to pay Alec Pierce $35 million a year? No. If somebody's willing to do that, you let him walk. You let him go to the Patriots. You let him go to whoever's willing to give him that contract. But if it's in the market that you're willing to pay, you were willing to pay him 25 and the number gets to 27, he really, really fits stylistically everything you want to do, and he's going to make Jaden Daniels' life easier. Sign the deal. $2 million when you have the amount of cap space, $2 million per season when you have this level of cap space because you need this type of impact player on your roster. I would say these are the type of gambles that you do want to make. Again, I never thought Alec Pierce was going to be available. I think there's a number for every one of these players that Adam Peters is not going to go over. If it's $1-2 million APY, you get into a little bit of a bidding war or something, and you're gonna say, okay, $1 or $2 million is not going to be the deal breaker for me if I can get him at that term, or you're going to move on to the next players. That's why they said, Alec Pierce, then Romeo Doubs, then Mike Evans. All these reports they're basically saying the same thing. We're going to go out and sign every free agent. This is the guy they want. This is the guy they'll settle for. This is the guy that ultimately they'll sign if everything goes awry. Well, that's basically saying we're going to sign every free agent that's available, every top of the market, mid-tier, and aged veteran to fill the gap. And basically what these reports are saying is they have no clue what we're going to do. And I like it that way. Again, I'm talking about Alec Pierce because stylistically what he would offer, the dynamic of his game that he would be able to add to the strength of what Jaden Daniels does, the fact that we don't have a player outside of Terry McLaurin on this roster that has shown consistently. Jalen Lane is a deep ball guy that he can win over the top with deep balls, but we also saw him struggle to catch the ball through contact, and the coverage in NFL is different, so he's going to have to adjust to that. You cannot bank your third season on your quarterback and his development on a Jalen Lane right now. Now, if you bring in an Alec Pierce or you bring in a Brandon Ayuk and whatever, and then Jalen Lane excels and he clicks, great. It's just a bonus to doing what you're adding, but this team needs guys behind pieces. It can't just be the Terry McLaurin show. We saw last year the depth of this roster, not having these 26 and 27-year-old guys to fill in. It's basically we had 30-year-old guys. We had our premier players that have been kind of holdover, and then we have draft picks that AP and has used in the mid rounds, and those guys were forced to play and fill positions that they were not currently ready for. Could they be ready for them this next year? Great. They could. We don't know. And you can't bank your job and you cannot bank the development of your quarterback on those guys. Again, you have to bring in pieces like this because you don't have these pieces. You just have not drafted well enough in the Ron Rivera era to have these pieces. You just don't have them on the roster. You don't have the Jamin Davis on this roster, which could have been a whole different list of players, in that draft class. It is what it is. It's the truth. The next year's draft class, again, the Emmanuel Forbes year, the Jahan Dotson year, you chose not to pick Chris Olave. So you don't have these wide receivers on the team. You don't have the centers on this team. You don't have the offensive line depth on this team. The offensive line depth that is on this team, AP and Dan Quinn, they've pretty much gone out and drafted that or signed it in free agency to be here, and a lot of those guys were older. So again, you're going to have to go into this offseason. You're going to have to pay some money. Another top of the market kind of guy that I'm going to discuss right now is a guy that I have discussed already previously, Quay Walker. Now that fits the narrative of we need linebackers. We need younger linebackers, 26, 27 in that range. Very, very fast, former first-round pick. He's not going to be retained by the Green Bay Packers. I've talked about it all offseason. The reason I was mentioning his name was because, again, I don't really get too hyped into the free agency market because it's so very unpredictable. But when I look around teams that might have players that walk at certain positions, it's because you already have the quarterback paid, you already have wide receivers paid, you have edges paid and things like that. Eventually you get certain percentages of the cap that are so filled up that you cannot retain certain players like this because they're not elite blue level players. Are they red level players? Yes, and it sucks when you lose these players, especially when you spend a first round pick on them. But that is the world of the NFL. When you're paying the Jordan Love the contract you're paying him, when you're paying the wide receivers the level of contract you're paying them, when you're paying the offensive tackles and the edge position, and it just adds up, the cornerback market and things like that. So again, Quay Walker, a guy that fits stylistically, age gap that we are missing on this roster. Again, this is the narrative of the season. I'm only reporting off of what Adam Peters himself said. We need to get younger. We need to get faster. Of course we need to get younger and we need to get faster because the roster that you inherited did not have the 25, the 26, the 27-year-old players on it. So you had to bring in the Zach Ertzes. You had to bring in the Bobby Wagners. You had to bring in these older guys to fill the roster out. And they've been one-year deals. Jeremy Chin was a great player. He ended up signing at another team. Will Harris, a little bit older, got hurt. So again, you need these 26 and 27-year-old guys to fill out these rosters. There's a lot of guys that I could put up on here, and we could discuss because realistically, there's a lot of players I like. There's we've been mentioned in the Kenneth Walker, sweepstakes and things like that too. Am I fine with us being in it? Yes. Do I want, Kenneth? I mentioned Kenneth Walker as a piece that I really, really liked going into this offseason. That was before he went to the Super Bowl. That's before his numbers got, totally, blown up and, things like that. I thought, Kenneth Walker was going to be a $9 to $10 million a year guy, going into this offseason before they went to the Super Bowl, before things like, the things transpired that, now have him in this range of now all of a sudden he's going to make $13 to $14 million a year. And that's not the type of money that you can pay for a one-dimensional player. I'm sorry, it just isn't. Quay Walker is a guy. Do I know if we sign Quay Walker, if we go into the Tyler Linderbaum, Alec Pierce sweepstakes, if we were to sign both of them guys, could you still sign Quay Walker? Yes, you could, because realistically, when we're talking about $22 million APY for like a Tyler Linderbaum, 23, maybe it gets to 24, and you talk about $27, $28 million for Alec Pierce. Okay, well, you would say two of those players just used up half of the available cap space. Well, that's not how these deals get structured. $22 million APY, there's going to be signing bonuses, there's going to be things, there's going to be money that the team is allocating on the back end of the contract. This is why we talk about Daron Payne making $28 million towards the cap this year. He's too expensive. Well, he didn't just become too expensive. He's been expensive the whole time in his contract, but as the contract has gotten towards the end of the deal, teams always back and the cap structure on these deals. That's just how they do it. So yes, you might sign Tyler Linderbaum for let's just call it $24 million APY. $12 million of that is going to be his cap hit for this year, and then it's going to progressively go up over the length of that contract that he signed for. At 25 years old, you see there's still tread on the tires. He should have he should be able to go through the length of that contract and excel and still be a plus level starter in this league, top 5 offensive guard in this league, and give you sustained production. Same thing with Alec Pierce. So again, both of these guys are expensive, but they're not going to use half of your cap space just to sign these 2 players. So that would still allow you to go out and add a linebacker like Quay Walker, or to go out and maybe sign a player like this. This is not necessarily a top of the market deal, but it's a player that I'm very, 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 very interested in because the Kenneth Walker market has elevated to what it is. The Tyler Algiers of the world. This is the department where I think we're going to make most of our signings moving forward. Yes, do I like Quay Walker? Would I want Quay Walker here? Yes, I've mentioned him multiple times. Alec Pierce, the scheme fit and everything he offers. Do I want him here? Of course I do. That said, I don't know. You've got to get these players to sign. You're going to have other teams bidding for their surfaces. You might have a couple teams that are willing to go out and overpay for them. So again, can you be in the markets? Yes, you can. Does that mean you're going to sign those players from the markets? No, necessarily. It doesn't. So again, should we be in on them top guys? Of course we should, because they systematically fit. Most of our signings are not going to be in that market. And again, I can talk about a number of players. I could talk about the Odafe Owehs. I could talk about the Boye Mafes. I could talk about the Jalen Phillips of the world, the edges, because again, the edge market is definitely a market that we're going to at least tap into to sign a player. I could go through 30 names on that list. We can talk about the top tier guys, and it's the same thing that everybody else is reporting. It is the same exact report as them talking about Alec Pierce. It's the same thing as them talking about, okay, well, if not Alec Pierce, then they're monitoring the Romeo Doubs market. Well, of course, if you can't get Alec Pierce, turn your focus to, Romeo Doubs. If you can't get Romeo Doubs and you are left empty for 2 guys that would fit what you do or what you're looking for from the number 2 wide receiver position, Mike Evans could be a 1-year stopgap to get us to the 2027 offseason. A veteran who has done it, can put up the type of numbers that you're looking for, the type of production on a very short-term deal, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be a higher-term deal for, a lot of money that's going into this next offseason on the cap. So again, that's why he's your third option, because he's going to be initially expensive. And you can't spread the money out over the course of the years, or it's just going to be funny money that you're carrying on a dead hit for something that is only going to be a short-term impact. So again, this team needs to be in the younger player market. I'm not the person that's go out every year and go out after free agency. I'm a bargain shopper free agency guy. That's why my last episode I had talked about Cade Otton, which is a player that I still hope that we sign. There's a ton of guys, and the Reek Woolen market. I don't know what it is. Could it be top tier? It could be. Do I think we pay Reek Woolen if it is top tier? I don't think so. But it is a market that I want to be in because Reek Woolen fits stylistically. Again, I'm only giving you the players that fit stylistically to what we do. Tyler Algier is a type of player that I think stylistically he has always produced. He's produced, and then they drafted Bijan, so of course Bijan got his carries, but Tyler Algier was a 1,000-yard rusher before Bijan Robinson was there. He is a thumping type back. He's a goal line back. He can catch the ball out of the backfield, as you're seeing behind me right there. Tyler Algier would be a great addition to Bill Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt to, boost and give you youth in the backfield. A guy on his second deal, I think he's probably 27, 26, still some miles and tread on the tires. He hasn't been a primary back, for the Atlanta Falcons because they've had Bijan Robinson, and they've been trying to give him more and more touches since they've had the 2. But Tyler Algier was so good that you needed to spell Bijan Robinson with this player. Now, Bijan Robinson is going to be the workhorse. Tyler Algier is going to move on. This could be a guy that you could get for probably a $7-8 million a year contract who, just like Alec Pierce, just like, Tyler Linderbaum, every year they have gotten progressively better. Those are the type of players that you do pay. Those are the type of players that you want on your roster. They're the type of players you need on your roster to field a contending level roster, to have a real chance to go into the playoffs, to actually make some noise in the playoffs and not just get in there, not just sneak in there. These are the type of players that you're going to have to hit on. These are the type of players and talent and age that you really, really need to excel on your roster. And so again, I'm not telling you anything that anybody else isn't telling you. I'm telling you the reason why you go after these type of pieces. Because these type of pieces are very, very good players. They're the type of pieces that you want on a roster. And again, scheme fit and stylistically, that's what you want. Could we go after Rashad White? He has a history with Jaden Daniels. Yes, we could. I don't think he's a better player than, Tyler Algier. Do I think they're very similar in, structure as far as financially the assets that you allocate to them? Yeah, I do actually. So again, I think going after a Rashad White is very similar to going after Tyler Algier. I just prefer Tyler Algier because I've seen Tyler Algier do it, and I've seen him do it more consistently than any of the other guys that we're going to talk about. And again, there's a ton of guys that this team is going to have to sign. We have 53 guys under contract right now. This roster is going to have to get to like 90 players to field through training camp. That is going to be players that we draft. It's going to be players that we sign. We're probably going to be in the market for 4 players that are going to command, multiple years of term, higher level APY, and things like that. Those 4 players that we're going to sign, I have no idea who they would be. And honestly, you don't even know if you're going to get your first or second or third guy. That's why I say free agency is always so hard to, go into and actually, have a feel for how it's going to pan out and what it's going to be. We could talk about the Rico Dowdles of the world, again, very similar to what, and honestly, if you take Rico Dowdle's 4 games from this past season off of the books, it's very pedestrian what he's giving you. So again, I would be very cautious about the amount of money and term that you're going to throw into a Rico Dowdle, because outside of blowing it up in 4 games against 4 of the worst defenses in the NFL, again, I think you got to be cautious with paying a player like that. This is where Tyler Algier, more consistent, more ascension every year. Every year the more touches he got, the better he got. Even though his touch level went down, his production went up. He didn't eclipse 1,000 yards after the first year where he was the primary back, you having Bijan Robinson, but his numbers per touch, everything you get, the age, the skill set, it's everything you want. That would be a really, really, really good, mid-tier signing for this team. And that's going to be where this team is. That's the market that this team is going to be in to fill out the level of this roster. We have signed our homegrown guys. We re-signed Drake Jackson to a 1-year deal. We re-signed Treylon Burks to a 1-year deal. We brought Dietrich Wise back. So again, you're signing the guys that were coming up in free agency on your team. You re-signed Jake Moody, which is a move that I like. You save some money instead of tendering him. You locked him up to a 1-year contract for like 1.5 instead of tendering him at the $3.5 million cap hit that it was going to be. So again, AP and them, they know what they're doing. They are going to allocate assets into this offseason. They have to fill out this roster. But again, we talked about the big names, the Alec Pierces, the Tyler Linderbaums. How many of those guys are you going to be in the market for? I would say there's a cap of probably 4. 4, top tier red chip players that come in that not only are red chip players by themselves, but the scheme that they've been playing in fits the scheme that we're going to use them in going forward. Like Alec Pierce's skill set is exactly what this team is missing. Tyler Linderbaum, because you got rid of Tyler Biadasz, is the skill set that you are missing. It's worth the money to put those type of assets around Jaden Daniels. And then, like I said, the Quay Walker. You need linebacker on defense. Maybe you think Sonny Styles is going to be going in the draft. Maybe you want to have the flexibility to where you sign Quay Walker. And if Sonny Styles is there, you have the freedom to do so because you used free agency this offseason to supplement your roster to where you can take the best player available. Whether that is a Jeremiah Love, signing Tyler Algier would not stop me from picking Jeremiah Love. If he is the best player on the board falls a certain way where Sonny Styles, none of the defensive ends are there, and maybe I don't want to maybe I did sign Alec Pearson. I think Alec Pierce is a sustainable piece going forward. Next year's draft is very, very good top end wide receiver. Maybe I stick with Alec Pierce, don't sign, draft Carnell Tate. I take a Jeremiah Love because Bill Ja'Cory, Krosky-Merritt, and Tyler Algier are not Jeremiah Love's level player. To where I signed Alec Pierce and I got Terry McLaurin. I'm not going to go out and sign a Carnell. I'm not going to go out and draft a Carnell Tate because looking at next year's class, I can maybe get a higher level wide receiver in next year's class, and maybe Terry McLaurin is, maybe if he does get injured or something like that, you're diving back into that market next year in the draft to get your long-term number one, true dynamic piece, which is going to be plentiful in the first round next year. That guy is not a sure thing in this draft. There's more stylistic players in this draft where next year the Cam Colemans of the world, the Jeremiah Smiths, maybe it clicks for Ryan Williams down there, but I think that's always going to be a 1B kind of player. And again, that would fit the Alec Pierce mold as far as what he gives you, the over-the-top burner. He's the smaller Deshaun Jackson style guy where it's the I run under it and track it. So again, if you're adding in Alec Pierce, you don't need that Ryan Williams like 1B type. So again, it's how this offseason is going to go. Would I love the Alec Pierce signing? I would. Would I love the Tyler Linderbaum addition? That's the one for me. If I could pick one player in this free agency crop that I could pick, again, I never talked about him because I never thought he was going to be available. Trading for Max Crosby, giving him the deal that they're going to have to give him. The Baltimore Ravens are up against the cap with Lamar Jackson. They're going to re-sign him this offseason. Players like Tyler Linderbaum actually hit the market, and they do not hit the market every year. This would be a perfect opportunity for the Commanders to take a position that was a good, solid, position for this team. They have dropped that player since. You got that money off their books. You're ascending that level to a premier level, upgrade. That is perfect for this team. This team is in the place with the cap space to be able to make that type of long-term move. Tyler Linderbaum is a long-term addition for this team. That is the type of player that you want to build around. Having him, Tunsil, and Connolly, man, that's everything you want in front of your quarterback. Then, like I said, then you supplement that with an Alec Pierce, or maybe you get a Jalen Phillips, or who has some injury concerns. I think Jalen Phillips is very, very much a structured contract signing. It's going to be a top of the market deal for what he's going to get, but as far as your APY, it's going to be top of the market, but your guaranteed money cannot be very, very high on that. I think that's the type of deal where you put 4 years in, it's a very, very high number. Only a year and a half of that is guaranteed, and then every year you probably restructure him to give him bonuses that season to give him guaranteed money each season of that contract, based on his health and how the availability of him moving forward. That's a tricky deal to get done. Will it get done? Yes, it's going to get done. Some team is going to give it to him, but some team might give him a three of the 4 years guaranteed. If you're in that market, you got to let Jalen Phillips go. You can't be that team. That is where I believe AP is going to be very, very smart. I don't believe he's going to just pay a guy to pay a guy. Like Jalen Phillips, the numbers that I'm just going to go off the reported numbers for Jalen Phillips. I've seen 4 for 92, $32 million guaranteed. So, okay. So you're basically guaranteeing 1/3 of the contract. That would just say, let's just say 1/3 of that is a year and a half of production for 4 years, give or take. 1.5 years of production is guaranteed, in that contract. So after a year and a half, there's no more guaranteed money. Like I said, that is the type of deal that you can be comfortable signing a Jalen Phillips to. It's top of the market. There's injury concerns. There's things there with him. But a year and a half of a marriage in guaranteed money means even if he gets hurt this year, you still have an out to where there's only a certain amount of dead cap on that if you need to get out of it after the first year if something was to happen. If some team is out there going to give him, 4 for 92 with $70 million guaranteed, you let them have him. You can't put yourself in that position with a player that has had the injury concerns. You would have to move on to the Odafe Owehs or the Boye Mafes. Boye Mafe does come with his own concern, even though I like him. The sack numbers were not there last year, but the pressure numbers are there. But we've had Montez Sweat. We've had guys like that. We've had guys that have really, really high pressure ratings but are not getting home. Dorrance Armstrong was that guy in 2024. Very, very high pressure rate, but not getting the sack totals, and we saw him this year. Sacks are very, very up and down unless you are the true Myles Garretts of the world. And even their numbers go up and down. Even you've seen it year in and year out. You've seen Myles Garrett have the 18 sack seasons, the 22 and a half, the 23 season that you just saw, and then you've also seen Myles Garrett be in the 15 sack range. You've seen him be in the 12 sack range. So again, sacks are very, very relative. It's opportunity meets you get the quarterback down on the ground. Sometimes they get rid of the ball, they spike it. There's a lot of things that go into sack totals for actually getting there. So the pressure rate is the more outlied statistic that you're really, really looking for as far as how much are they actually impacting the quarterback. Boye Mafe's numbers are there, but again, coming off of a 3-sack season, there is some risk to that. And what is his market going to be? If it's getting up in there into the 28, 30, $35 million range, you probably got to walk a different direction. Same with Odafe, because it's 1 year of production. And it's only really 1/2 of a year in production when he got to the Jesse Minter scheme out with the Chargers, because, we had seen him flash in Baltimore, but it finally clicked under Jesse Minter with the Chargers, who is now actually the Ravens head coach. So again, there's a reason all these guys are on the market. The reason that I'm actually willing to go in on the top 2 offensive players in the market is schematical fit. The edge rusher market is always going to be very, very similar to wide receiver. It's, what is this guy's skill set? What are we looking to add on our defense? Like, are we looking to get a run guy? Well, last year we were looking to get a run guy. We went after Dietrich Wise, point in case. This year we are looking for predominantly pass rush ability, because we have lacked a guy that can create sacks and create pressures outside of the scheme alone at the edge position. We don't have the Montez Sweats or the Chase Young guys here, and even those guys ended up being schematical players. Even Chase Young, considered generational. This is why I do not use that generational word. It's such a retarded word. Was he a blue chip prospect coming out of college? Hell yeah, he was. No doubt about it. 6'6", 270 pounds, looked like he ran a 4.5 on the field, explosively dynamic, could jump out of the gym, batted passes down, was relentless, and then played the run with high effort. So again, Chase Young, blue chip prospect. When you blow your knee out, and again, he ended up being a stylistic player. That is what we are going to be signing throughout this offseason in free agency. The only one that is not a stylistic player, and even honestly, he is too a stylistic player because he's a zone blocker, Tyler Linderbaum. A top 2 center in the league is still a stylistic player. He was not a blue chip player coming out of college. He was a red level player coming out of college. He went to the right scheme. We run that scheme. So again, it's a stylistic match. We need that. He gives you blue level production. He has given the Ravens blue level production, so he has blue level upside. That is the type of player that you give term and that you give a deal to. If Tyler Linderbaum, if whatever time it goes live today, I don't know if it's 3, 4, noon, whatever time that the free agency tampering window opens. If he was the first player that we signed, I'd be elated. That is the one player that I would love to add to this team, because the biggest precedent for me is keeping Jaden Daniels healthy. Now, does Jaden Daniels have to assist in that? Yes, Jaden Daniels has to protect himself after he bails out of the pocket. But while he is in the pocket, we want Jaden Daniels throwing the ball from the pocket and bailing out of the pocket to throw the ball on the run, and being a quarterback first, not traditionally a runner. That's why we're talking about the Tyler Algiers and the Jeremiah Loves for this team. Again, there's a ton of needs on this defense, but this team is only ever going to go as far as the development that we give to Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is always going to be the most important piece on this team. It doesn't mean he's more important than the team. You need a defense. You need a defense to compete in this league. But everybody is looking at this last offseason. They're like, defense wins championships. Well, let me just be real with you. Defenses do win championships. But defensive teams only win that championship once every 12 years. Let's be very real. If you go over it, you can go back. The 2012, Seattle Seahawks, or 2013 Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks this past year, the 2001 Ravens, the defensive dominant team only wins once every 12 years. The really, really good defense with a sustainable offense, they might win the Super Bowl once every 4 years. But realistically, outside of those 2 outliers in them 12-year windows, it is generally the premier level quarterback with a good enough defense. That is realistically the range. It is more the 15 to 10 range defense with the premier level quarterback that can put the ball where it needs to be in the biggest moments of the biggest games. And we have that player. Protecting that player and maximizing the growth of that player in the first 5 years is the most important thing that is going to go on this team. Keeping him healthy, letting him learn, protecting the shit out of him while he is cheap, and then into his second contract, getting him the weapons to grow with and develop with, so he is not out here trying to throw prayer balls to Luke McCaffrey or trying to bank on Luke McCaffrey being a team's number one cornerback like Patrick Surtain or some other guy, it's just not going to happen. You need to give Jaden Daniels the weapons. He needs to have that confidence moving forward. Do not Joe Burrow this guy and not protect him. Do not Andrew Luck this guy and not protect him. You have a Tyler Linderbaum on the market right now. Go get that guy. Get the guy that protects your investment in the quarterback, that allows him to achieve his ceiling because he feels comfortable in the pocket, sitting in there and throwing the ball, because he is a runner. He is a runner. He is always going to naturally want to run. That is a part of his instinct. That is a part of the way that he plays the game. You're not trying to dial the running back from him. You're trying to dial the passing up in him, because he is that good of a passer. He is that clean of a passer. He plays that good from the pocket. And you want that to be the part of his game that you're getting out of him 75 to 80%, and then the other 20% when he gashes teams with the legs because he is carving them up through the air and they finally back off of him with the spy and things like that because they just cannot stop our offense. That is the blend. That is the formula for success. That is how this team is going to reach the next level. That is how Jaden Daniels is going to progress to maximize his skill set, and that is how this team is going to be built around him to maximize his skill set and get you to where his skill set says he should be, and that is a Super Bowl. He is that good of a player, but he is only going to be that good of a player if they put the pieces around him. The Tyler Linderbaums, the wide receiver that can catch the deep ball over the top, whether it is Alec Pierce. I'm not in the Rashid Shaheed market because to me he's going to get highly overpaid for the player that he is. People are like, oh, he's a special teams ace and whatever. Well, I'm like, Jalen Lane, you just drafted a special teams ace. So realistically, if you're just looking for a burner, okay, go out and sign a burner for $10 million a season who is just a burner. But you could, because Rashid Shaheed is no different than that. It's not like Rashid Shaheed is running, slant routes 5 and then taking a hit. Rashid Shaheed is a burner. He is a burner who can excel in special teams. Yes, I think there is more to his game, but it has never been shown. Can he excel? Yes, but I'm not paying that guy north of $15 million for anything that he's doing. Like, we could go back and sign De'Ami Brown, who just who signed last year for $10 to $12 million, who is a burner. We could add that piece back, who has a fit level here with our quarterback for a lot less money. So again, this is where being smart in free agency meets being responsible. And if you really want to do it, and you're going to go into the market and you're going to pay these level contracts, there's a reason why you got to pay these contracts. I've mentioned it for this team, why this team needs to go into this free agency and spend these type of level contracts. It's because we have not drafted and developed previous to this regime. And to get this team to where you want in this window and beyond this window, you're going to need these type of level players on this roster, whether you get, and this is the only way you're going to get them. We don't have 13 draft picks to trade, for Tyler Linderbaum, last year. We didn't have 13 draft picks going into this offseason to be in the Max Crosby, market and things like that. So again, you're going to have to use free agency this year. This will probably be one out of like 6 years where you're ever going to hear me and talking about free agency. I'm like, this is a offseason you really need to be into it. Normally if I'm into free agency, it's one guy. It might be one guy at the top of the market. The reason I'm into multiple guys this year is because there actually are multiple guys that hit the market. Again, as many times as I've talked about the free agency market, I didn't expect Alec Pierce. I didn't expect Tyler Linderbaum. I expected the Quay Walkers. That's why I talked about him. I expected certain guys, and that's why I talked about him. Jaquan Briskers, I expected him. That's why I talked about him. Now that Alec Pierce and Tyler Linderbaum are out there, and because they are a stylistic fit, that's why I'm talking about them and actually okay with it. So again, this is we're going to be talking a lot of free agency over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to get back into the draft and things like that. I'm also going to be talking about the draft just to break this free agency stuff up because it is a lot of craziness once you get past the initial wave. Outside of signing a few key pieces that really, really fit, I'm going to be talking more heavily on the draft. That's what I enjoy, that's what I like, and that's what I do. But it is free agency tampering day. Until Wednesday, none of these deals are really, really locked up. So even if we do report something like that, something can still happen. So you don't really want to celebrate it until they're signed on Wednesday. So again, everybody enjoy the tampering week. It's going to be busy. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be chaotic. Your phones are going to be going off ESPN, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be reports from basically the moment that window opens for the next 5 or 6 days as these top 30, top 50 guys start, the big names start working off the board. Again, I appreciate you guys for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast. I just wanted to talk about everything that I'd heard over the weekend. I didn't want to give multiple shows and just really get into it. I figured this was going to be the time where it was going to be all the Commanders have money. They're going to be in on everybody. Well, realistically, they should. And then stylistically, these are the guys that they really, really should be in on. So we'll see what they do. Good or bad, for better or worse. I'm going to be here reporting on this team, and like I said, we're going to get more into the draft. We're going to be free agency heavy for the rest of this week, and then, like I said, we're going to move back on because I got a lot of draft things and draft nuggets that I really, really want to see. My board is locked in. Yeah, I'll keep getting mocks to you, and like all season reports, we'll see how this free agency goes. That will very much probably impact the way that the mock drafts are going to go and the players that I'm going to talk about. Going to get more into the mid rounds of drafts and things like that. So again, thank you guys for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast. It's your host, Cody Potter, man. I hope you guys have a blessed week. Hopefully you guys, if it's the free agency guys that we should sign, hopefully you guys get the guys that you want. Hopefully AP just gets the right guys. That's what I always pray for. So again, have a blessed week. Hopefully you enjoy your free agency. If you're not a Commanders fan, you're actually just checking me out because you're a friend of mine. I hope your team gets everybody that you want to, unless it's the guys that we need. So again, thank you for checking out the Blue Chip Podcast. Have a blessed week, everybody. Stay safe. Peace.